Okay, welcome to Mrs. Berger's Algebra 1. Today we will be reviewing solving one-step equations. If you remember from last year, pre-algebra 7th grade, to solve one-step equations, you just basically do the inverse or the opposite operation. Opposite operations are operations that undo each other, such as adding will undo subtracting, subtracting will undo adding, multiplication and division also are paired together. So our very first example, we have x plus 7 is equal to 4. If you remember from last year, we would draw a line down the equal sign to separate our two sides. We are trying to isolate the variable. We want the x to be by itself. So to get the x by itself, we have to move that plus 7 to the other side. So we do the inverse operation, which would be minus 7, or you could look at that as a positive 7, and so the inverse of a positive 7 would be a negative 7. Notice that a positive 7 and a negative 7 are additive inverses, so when you add them, it gives you 0. So we usually cross those out, drop down what's left. Over here, we use the rules for addition, which say when I'm adding two numbers and my signs are different, I'm actually going to subtract them, big minus small, and keep the sign of the bigger digit. So the one that would win the war if I had 4 positives, 7 negatives. Obviously there are more negatives, so it would win. So x is equal to negative 3 is my final answer. You could check your answer by plugging it in to the equation. You can do this by hand or on your calculator. So negative 3 plus 7, we're wondering if that's 4. On your calculator, you would do negative 3 plus 7, enter, and then check to see if it was 4. And we can tell that 4 is equal to 4, therefore it checks out. I suggest everybody checks all their problems. You can use your calculator to do it, so it won't take much time. Okay, in this example, it's the same type of thing. We want the x to be by itself. We need to get rid of a minus 12 or a negative 12. So we're going to add 12 to both sides. You could put a plus sign there if you want. Most of the time you'll see that I usually don't. Additive inverses give you 0. Signs are the same. I add. So I get x is equal to 15. Don't forget to check it. In this example, here's my x, but attached to its hip is a negative 6. This is multiplication. This means negative 6 times x. Well, the opposite of multiplying by a negative 6 is dividing by a negative 6. Now, in this example, the inverse operation is the division. Okay? So when you divide both sides by the same number, you have to take that sign along for the ride. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 gives you 1, so that gives me an x, 1x. And then 48 divided by negative 6 gives me my negative 8. So I get x is equal to negative 8. Remember to check your work using a calculator. In this example, here's my x. It's attached with a division of 4. The inverse operation of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4. I'm going to show multiplication by 4 on both sides. Sorry, that shouldn't be there. That's a 5. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. This is 5 times 4. So here, 4 divided by 4 leaves me 1. So it gives me 1x. Well, we normally don't write the 1, so we just put x. And then over here, I have 5 times 4. That's going to give me 20. So x is equal to 20. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. 20 divided by 4 is in fact 5. And again, this is a little typo-ish. That little line should not be there. Okay, our next example, a little bit more complicated. Attached to the hip of the x is multiplication by 2/3. So the opposite of multiplying by 2/3 would be to divide by 2/3. So we would normally have division by 2/3 here on both sides. If you remember, to divide by a fraction, we actually multiply both sides by its reciprocal or multiply by the fraction flipped over. I normally do not show this step because I know the next step would be to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm just simply going to do that. Multiply both sides by 3/2. So 3/2 times 2/3 gives me 1x. Again, we don't show the 1, so that normally is not there. Over here I have 8 times 3/2, two ways to deal with it. 8 times 3 divided by 1 times 2. Or you could notice that on the bottom and the top we have factors that are the same. We could take a factor of 2 out of the 2 and the 8. That leaves me top times top, bottom times bottom. Again, we don't need that 1 on the bottom, so we're not going to write it. So my final answer is going to be x is equal to 12. So plug that in and confirm that 2/3 of 12 is 8. Okay, if you need more help on one-step equations, please make sure you read section 3.1 in your book, or go to the Khan Academy and maybe type in math and then one-step equations for some more help.